This is the fastest, most powerful helicopter in Afghanistan. The RAF's Chinook. It's the lifeline to troops in the combat zone, dropping supplies and moving soldiers 24/7. It's built to cope with Arctic and desert conditions, and its pilots need to be able to handle any terrain. The Chinook's twin rotor blades produce a massive downwash. No other aircraft creates a dust cloud that's larger or denser. This is what they call a brownout. And pilot Chris Gent's got to perfect the technique before he's allowed out on a mission.
K7 and pistol 11, please. Cheers. We tend to make a habit of taking the weapons whenever we get airborne, because we could be diverted away from the airfield for some reason. Probably not today, but it's just we do it every time, just as a habit.
Landing in a brownout takes nerves of steel, as instructor Steve Badham knows all too well.
The problem we have is that called completely obscure the picture, and we rely solely on a visual picture to land the aircraft out here. So if we lose that picture, then we have to abort the landing.
And that could mean the difference between life and death for troops waiting on the ground.
Looking forward to it. Should be quite good fun. It's just waiting for the instructor, for the rest of the crew to get themselves ready, and then we'll be good to go.
Just go straight out and what we do, I'd quite like to have a look at the area of the heart, so if we
They need to find the right patch of desert to land in.
just beyond there, there's that little triangle, which I reckon will be quite dusty, quite good.
Chris's crewmen will be counting him down for the landing.
So the crewman is telling you where the dust is on the way down the approach, and then if you do it right, you brown out for the minimum amount of time.
It is difficult. It's a skill that takes a while to master.
Blinded by the dust, Chris lands with a bump, bashing the helicopter.
It's possible to damage the aircraft, but the main risk is ripping off wheels.
The final stage is quite quick. You can afford to make the angle probably slightly shallower, so you won't kind of hit the back wheels quite so hard. Okay.
It's all about approaching the ground at the right angle, and practice makes perfect.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Half wheels, top wheels. Yeah, just look at the angle again, do the whole. Roger.
So we're just going to keep doing it again and again just to practice the techniques.
We ended up quite steep again towards them, whereas you almost want to try and achieve a constant angle on the way down.
Finally, Chris gets the hang of it. Keeping the dust cloud behind him, he's got visibility to the last possible moment.
Yeah, the approach angle was much nicer. Yeah, that feels better now.
He's cracked it.
I think we might just call it a day.
One more pilot, ready for action.
Yeah, good fun. Really enjoyed it. Definitely got a lot from it. It's good to actually practice it for real, out in rather than in the simulator, out on the proper bit of dusty ground.
All that fine dust can play havoc with a helicopter. Engineers like Paul Gormanley have to get it serviced and cleaned up. It's a thankless job, and dirty too.
We get a lot of stick in the mess from all these officer types who sit in an office all day and they just can't understand. I don't think they even know we exist. As far as I think they're concerned, little pixies come out and fix the helicopters and then the aircrew go and save the world.
It's not the most dangerous job in Afghanistan, but working on a 20-foot helicopter has its risks.
All the blades leak oil, so everything's like an ice rink, so the chances of falling off are fucking dreadful. The lad I replaced, he fell off and broke his leg, so he owes me a few beers because I came out 3 weeks early to replace him.
Chinooks have a punishing schedule in harsh conditions, so the checks have to be thorough.
You've got a cooling fan in here, so if anything's falling in, it could be quite fatal to the aircraft. It's dead birds. Dead birds tend to end up in there quite a lot, so anything that we've hit on flight, really. And that is about it in there.
The Chinook is an easy target for the Taliban.
Checking the blades for any damage. They do tend to get shot quite a lot because they're doing a lot of rotations. When people fire up, normally the blades take the damage, but you wouldn't want any bullet holes in them too often. But I'd say, as far as it goes, it's enjoyable sometimes. It's like any job, really. Hit or miss, I suppose.
The RAF has a fleet of just 8 Chinooks based here. But every 3 months, one of them needs to be sent back to the UK for a complete overhaul. A fully serviced Chinook's then sent out to replace it. At RAF Brownout in Oxfordshire, they're expecting an important passenger. A stripped-down Chinook. And it's going to be fitted inside this C-17 Globemaster. Flying 4,000 miles to Afghanistan would seriously reduce the helicopter's engine life. So, it's hitching a ride.
We have to break it down in a small enough size to be swallowed up by the C-17. We need to get the helicopter there as quick as we can to ensure it gets rebuilt and does its job.
Next stop, Kandahar, where it's up to the RAF engineers to fit it back together again. It's midnight, and the RAF engineers have just had a delivery from the UK. The workhorse of the war in Afghanistan, the Chinook, and it's in bits.
If anybody sees anything ahead in time, just shout stop.
It needs to be put together fast because they're 1 Chinook down. Gaz is new to the job.
My whole point of being here on Chinooks is for experience if I go on to further training, so I'm looking forward, start to learn.
His first big challenge is to get the helicopter out of the C-17 Globemaster.
A bit nervous because potentially we're lifting quite expensive heavy equipment. It's going to be winched out. I'm going to look forward just to make sure that forward's clearing the ramp area. We're just going to winch it out nice and carefully.
All the Chinook's parts are stored in its body. It's a bit like laying out all the parts for a giant Airfix model, and Maz is the man in charge.
When they're breaking down in the UK, they just put it all on board, ship it over here, and then we unload it, and then systematically fit it, really.
The major jobs are to fit the 2 huge turrets onto the front and back. These house the gearboxes and drive shafts which transfer the power from the engines up to the rotor heads that turn the 6 blades. The engineers have got to get it right because these are what steer and manoeuvre the bulky Chinook, giving it stability and its phenomenal lifting power.
Oh. Nice and slow, nice and slow.
Each blade is 25 feet long, so it takes the whole team just to lift one.
Okay, furthest one away.
Outside, the temperatures drop to an icy -9 degrees.
Once you get going and you've got your clothing on, it's not too bad, but it's cold. Eugene, just keep an eye on that flange at the back, bud. 1, 2, 3, push.
Not too much. That'll do.
Not too fast.
Now everything's unloaded, they need to attach the blades. But there's a problem.
Unfortunately, we don't have a crane as of yet. The Army guys are using it down the other end of the airfield, and they have priority over us. So unfortunately, we have to wait, which is frustrating for us guys because we're trying to get this rebuilt and get it flying, really. So we just have to wait out for the Army.
It's early morning at the airbase and the Chinook engineers have finally got the crane they needed.
Are we ready to rock and roll?
Now they can get on with the job of putting the helicopter back together. Maz is the boss man. First job, getting the turrets on. This will take the power up to the blades.
It's just a slow process really, because if you rush it, you'll just damage the airframe, and we don't really want that. Come on, tell them to get a jib on. We all know that the bigger picture is getting the Chinook serviceable so the guys in the field can get their ammunition, they can get their food, their water. Everybody here knows that. Coming up!
Next, the rotor heads that hold the blades.
Coming in!
It's all down to teamwork.
The main thing really is good communication between us and the guys on the airframe. Coming down! Right now we're just about to fit the blades onto the aircraft. It's like the final chapter. The guys are just up there now getting it prepared, ready to go.
The 25-foot blades are put into position with a high-tech bit of kit.
Hit it!
A good end to Maz's last day in Kandahar.
Yeah, sure. That's my first. Gaz has had two.
I deserved it. I were up there actually grafting. So.
And what, and I was down here?
Yeah.
Work hard, you play hard, really, don't you? It's customary to buy donuts when you leave, but I'm not buying any. Sorry.
When are you doing?
Tomorrow.
Are you coming in to shift?
Yeah, but there's 15 of us leaving. So that means there's going to be 15 boxes of donuts.
I've got 2 in.
So that's going to be 16 boxes of donuts. That's like 200 donuts.
They'll go.
I bet they will.
Yeah.
It's now over to the pilots to put the engineers' work to the test. Maz makes a few last-minute safety checks before it's clear to fly.
All the components work as they should have done, no leaks, so we're all good to go. Brilliant. Here she goes now. It looks good. Does look good.
And another Chinook's ready for the combat zone. The British troops are getting ready for a very important day in the calendar. The 7th Remembrance Sunday since NATO arrived in Afghanistan. The Royal Marines, the RAF and the Army assemble at the camp's boardwalk.
We know we're very close here to parts of this country where people are putting their lives at risk every single day. So we remember them and think of them as we'll be here in this service.
Base Commander Andy Fryer is leading the ceremony.
It is very important. It's important back in the UK, but I think it's even more so here. And to reflect on what's gone before in a place like this, in the midst of a live operation, I think it's hugely important.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, all the years condemn. The going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
NATO troops have been in Afghanistan since 2001, but a third of those who have lost their lives have been killed in the past year.
Second Lieutenant Neville Anthony Lockwood. Corporal Damien Mulverhill. Lieutenant John David Thornton. Marine Dale Edward Gostick. Marine Jamie Robert John Hutton. 4-2 Commando. Marine Benjamin John Busnell, Paul. 18 UK Special Forces Signal Regiment. Marine Jamie Robert John Hutton. Marine David John Marsh. Marine Joshua Howell.
It is emotional. It's not just a bunch of names on some marble slab back home, you know, when you stood around a monument. These are guys that we've known and served with, so yeah, it does make it very real.
The day's not quite at an end for Kev Mackey, because he's got one last duty to perform: organising the volleyball.
Somebody has to be in charge, don't they, I guess. So I'm the keeper of the balls for the moment, and at least I can then put the word round and say to people, you know, are you coming to volleyball? And we get a team together. It's my little bed space. This is my home. Comfy bed with quilt, which is a real bonus.
Of course, Kev has a rigorous hygiene test for his volleyball kit.
You know, give it a sniff and see if it's going to do another day in the standard military fashion. Right. Oh, good serving. Should have had that.
It's not quite California dreaming, but in a war zone, you grab your fun where you can.
Yeah, well played.
As a player, well, he's still learning, obviously, here, but no, he's out here every week, so probably fine by the end of the tour. He'll be a professional. He's quite good at clapping, I think.
Oh, yes, sweet. Yeah, good play. Oh, been a bit busy for me, so just coming out here, you forget all about work and just have concentrate on the game for a few minutes. It's good fun.